let's get into the match. This best of 3 is going to start off with this first game, and we'll see where our players take it from here.
It's going to be really interesting, Rose. This is the most important match of the day. We have the Ninetales and Dragonite coming out from Z, and the Annihilate and Clefable immediately for James, looking to start boosting up that Annihilate with bulk up, maybe take some hits and boost up that Rage Fist as well.
Annihilate is so interesting because I think when we take a look at this Pokemon, often we do look at something like being able to have beat up, but we don't actually have any option for that on this team. Annihilate is just going to be able to bulk up itself to be able to give itself those attack and defense boosts that'll really make sure that Annihilate can hit hard.
No beat up and also no leftovers on this Annihilate, but it's holding the Safety Goggles item instead, which is very strong in its own right, but that does mean if Annihilate takes any damage, the only way to recover it will be that Drain Punch.
Well, this is a matchup that both of these trainers must know very well, running two of the most popular teams in the format, and we are able to see one of those examples of why. This Dragonite with that Terra Flying is now going to be able to go for something like a Terra Flying Terra Blast, which would be otherwise super effective into this Annihilate, but it's going to go for a Protect, and in fact, that is a double Protect from James, just to try to fish out what these attacks could be, especially knowing that this Alolan Ninetales does have the choice specs.
I really like that Freeze Dry lock from Z. The Terra type on both of these Pokemon on James' side of the field is water. So if either did try to go for a Terastallization, especially that Annihilate to not be super effective into that Terra Flying Terra Blast, the Freeze Dry would have hit it super effectively still. Really smart double protect from James though, just making sure that you know what this Ninetales is capable of doing. There's not really a great way for Z to punish that. You know, this Dragonite isn't Dragon Dance or anything like that. Ninetales doesn't have Encore or even Aurora Veil. So now you can safely go for Follow Me, knowing that there are no spread moves being used this turn.
And so the double up of the Freeze Dry as well as something like that Terra Blast, Clefable's usually pretty bulky, but that crit is going to put this Clefable in a range where it could get knocked out to a secondary follow-up. Annihilate gets that breathing room to be able to go for its first bulk up of the game, but it's the follow-up of this Terra Blast from the Dragonite that if Clefable does get knocked out here, then it's no longer able to provide that support, but it just barely hangs on well enough to get this Citrus Berry recovery.
And that's crucial for James. Clefable sticking around this turn means that it will be able to redirect one more Freeze Dry from this Ninetales and allow Annihilate to possibly go for one more bulk up before it has to take an attack from this Dragonite. Of course, Dragonite being a physical attacker means that these bulk ups are really limiting its damage output. Notably though, still Ninetales in a really strong spot. Annihilate I don't think is able to one-hit KO either of these two Pokemon right now, especially considering the multi-scale on Dragonite is active, and you haven't taken any attacks, taken any damage, so your Rage Fist has not been boosted at all.
Another double protect from James. This is really slowing down the game. You're sort of starting to tire out the strategy of maybe do you force Z into a position where you switch out the Ninetales? Is there a possibility that you end up maybe trying to think about what to lock into next? Do you get a chance to fish for any more information about what those third and fourth Pokemon could be from Z? But you can see that focus is still on the Annihilate. Need to knock it out before it's able to get another bulk up.
You're stalling out the snow a little bit. Could come in handy once this Ninetales doesn't have that defense boost from the snow anymore due to its ice typing. Also, just kind of gives you another shot to see if Z possibly is trying to switch something out. You can then reevaluate, you know, do I want to keep Clefable around, switch it out into something else, or am I okay giving it up to protect Annihilate for one more turn? The only +1/+1 attack and defense on Annihilate will become a bit of a threat, especially once those Rage Fist boosts start stacking, but unfortunately still just that 50 base power at the moment.
Well, the Follow Me here is going to redirect away this Freeze Dry once again, and without that crit, even with this Clefable was going to get knocked out on this turn. But here lies maybe part of the reason why James would want to be able to sacrifice this Clefable. You get another bulk up, and when you take a look at this physical Dragonite on the other side, this Terra Blast now with that +2 defense stack, not going to be able to deal too much damage to that Annihilate, or at least not knock it out. But that was still a lot.
It still is a whole lot of damage at +2 defense. Obviously able to stick around and survive it, but this Ninetales, you don't have a Clefable around to redirect Freeze Dry anymore. You do bring Whimsicott in, so you can go for a Tailwind, you know, possibly boost the speed of your Annihilate. But now at +2 attack with one Rage Fist boost, say that 5 times fast, it might be possible to one-hit KO this Ninetales, but with the Snow defense boost, I'm not even sure that's possible. And of course, this Dragonite with the multi-scale will be able to stick around. We have seen the Annihilate is faster than Dragonite at least, so if you want to try and break multi-scale with a Moonblast, you do have to risk Freeze Dry just one-hit KOing Annihilate from this point too.
Yeah, because with those bulk ups, you're not going to protect yourself from any of that special attack damage from the Ninetales, and that Choice Specs is making those attacks hit even harder. I kind of like what James is going here for, though. You can protect this Annihilate once again, try to stall out that Snow ever more, and you allow this Whimsicott to get this Tailwind active, so maybe you do have a chance on this next turn to retaliate with this Annihilate and actually make some use out of those bulk ups. Freeze Dry, though, into the Protect, that's big.
Yeah, Freeze Dry does go into Protect, but Terra Blast does not. Whimsicott will be brought down to its Focus Sash. And because this Dragonite is not choice banned, it does have the freedom to switch its attacks. One more Extreme Speed could be the end of the game for Whimsicott. Luckily for James, though, it is the Ghost-type Terra on the Whimsicott, so if you do want to commit your Terrestrialization to that Whimsicott, that can guarantee that it can't be knocked out by the normal-type move Extreme Speed. You can give yourself the chance to, double target Ninetales or Dragonite with Moonblast and Rage Fist, which is most likely enough to knock out both. We do see the Snow end here, I believe, so the defense boost on the Ninetales is gone, which could be very important, but of course, we're like 4 or 5 turns into the game and Z hasn't taken any damage yet. I think it's very reasonable to expect you can just swap the Ninetales out and bring it back in.
So then do you try to think ahead? What else does Z have that could potentially be brought in the back? Maybe you're trying to keep something on the switch in, and it is going to be the Ninetales that switches out, so saving that Snow for a little bit later. Taking its place, though, we do have this Garchomp, so this is something that is going to take a pretty sizable amount of damage, but we do see this Terrestrialization committed there onto the Annihilate, just to keep it a little bit safer. You might not get knocked out to a Terra Blast now.
Certainly a Terra Blast, I think, won't be enough damage, and I like this a lot because if you are targeting that Ninetale slot, it just means that there's no chance you get knocked out by a Freeze Dry. Moonblast going into the Garchomp, though. James opting to double target that slot with his 2 Pokemon. Drain Punch coming through, which will be nice to heal up some damage, although you do have to take a little bit of Rough Skin in return, so probably a net neutral there.
And this Dragonite still gets a chance to actually go for an attack. And as you said, because it's an Assault Vest, it does have an opportunity here to change up what it's going to do. But why fix what's not broken? This Terra Blast, especially with that same type attack bonus, additional damage, it's not enough to knock out the Annihilate this time because you did get that defensive Terrestrialization, but now you get a chance to maybe even bring back in the Ninetales after you sacrificed your Garchomp. I
think that's really smart targeting from Z as well, not getting baited by a possible Terra Ghost in that Whimsicott. You go for the Terra Blast into the Annihilate, that's more guaranteed damage. Annihilate had protected the prior turn, so there's really no reason for James to try and go for a double, especially in Tailwind. You'd kind of be wasting your own Tailwind turns there. So you guarantee that damage. If the Annihilate doesn't Terrestrialize, it gets knocked out, but if it does, you've put it into Extreme Speed range. I think even with the +2 defense, this is likely more than enough damage to knock out the Annihilate from here. And of course, this Whimsicott, now that it cannot Terrestrialize, is just a sitting duck for that Extreme Speed as well. So it's just done a really good job getting damage out, not letting James, stifle the damage with something like the Bulk Up, with that Follow Me. And I think that Freeze Dry especially was a really smart lock on the first turn, just to keep that Annihilate from Terrestrializing.
You're still going to be able to get damage off onto something, but it is based on whether or not Z wants to take out the Whimsicott or the Annihilate. It's going to be the Whimsicott on the receiving end of that Extreme Speed, so no Moonblast at play for this next turn. And when we go for the Rage Fist, you've already taken 2 stacks at this point, so that is just going to be a one-hit knockout onto that Ninetales. That's really big now to even up this Pokemon count.
Pokemon count is even, which is really good for James. However, I think this Extreme Speed is still just too big of a threat. This Annihilate really can't attack the Dragonite anymore, and especially because this Dragonite still has its multi-scale active. Incineroar comes in, you're going to get a Defiant boost in this Annihilate, so if by some miracle you are able to survive at Extreme Speed, that's a pretty free Drain Punch in Incineroar, which would heal you up pretty far. But we might just have to rely on this Hydreigon for damage for the rest of the game.
I mean, the biggest issue here is that you still have Fake Out potential from the Incineroar, so James is forced to have to protect it. Otherwise, you are just going to get knocked out to a Fake Out and Extreme Speed. But it still leaves this Hydreigon potentially move to operate when maybe you can get rid of this multi-scale finally on this Dragonite to actually do some damage. But that Assault Vest into the special Hydreigon is going to matter a lot.
It will. I think if you do go for something like a Dark Pulse in this Hydreigon, I don't know if you can lock into Draco Meteor at this point, because he would be forcing yourself to be at -246 special attack the rest of the game. Dark Pulse does go into Dragonite. It does not flinch, and Z targets the Hydreigon once again with this Terra Blast. He has not been falling for James's Protects at all this game.
Ooh, and the knockoff as well is going to remove the choice specs, but that actually might be a little bit more beneficial for James. You don't have the Tailwind anymore, though, and that's going to be a huge issue for this Hydreigon to make sure that it's going to be able to get this damage off.
Yeah, Tailwind did expire. I do believe Annihilate should still be faster than both the Dragonite and the Incineroar. Of course, the Incineroar does have the Rocky Helmet, so you have to worry about some of that recoil damage, but Extreme Speed, despite the +2 defense, is enough to knock out this Annihilate.
And Annihilate tried its best here, and it comes down to this Hydreigon with such low HP to get something accomplished. And the Dark Pulse into the Dragonite just isn't going to be dealing nearly as much because it Assault Vest is making it so much more tanky. And so with that final KO, Z is going to take the first game in this best of 3.
Really well played by Z just to get that consistent damage going with the Dragonite, with the Ninetales. And I respect the game plan that James was going for. Like, the Annihilate can be a really, really good checkmate piece, kind of like some Archaludons we've seen in past games, where at a certain point it becomes really hard to damage it, especially with Drain Punch. You're recovering a lot of HP, and of course those Rage Fist stacks get some really big damage out. Just unfortunately, just wasn't enough. I really, again, like this Freeze Dry because it forced both the Clefable and the Annihilate really to not go for that Terastallization.
Ooh, that crit though onto the Clefable at the very beginning with Freeze Dry,
yeah.
It did put it into a pretty uncomfortable range. And I wonder if that crit hadn't gone through, do you actually survive so that you can take 4 attacks total with the Citrus Berry recovery? It's so hard to say.
It really is.
This Annihilate, while it was able to get those Rage Fist attacks, you got the stacks onto that move as well, it just felt pinned by every move that Z was making.
It really was. Z did a really good job, forcing no Terastallization early on and then kind of forcing the Annihilate to Terastallize later when you would have been knocked out by one more Terra Blast. And by forcing Annihilate to Terastallize, it loses its Ghost typing. It loses the advantage of being immune to that Extreme Speed. So once it gets down to a certain threshold of HP, it was down, at that 28 HP remaining in the red. That means that you can kind of just leave it alone as long as you have Multiscale active. It's not going to be one-hit KOing you, even with the +2 attack, even with the Rage Fist boost it had. And so as soon as you are in range for a KO, you can just Extreme Speed it and end the game.
So Dragonite is a big problem.
Yeah.
How are we going to see James actually break through this?
It's funny that Dragonite was such a big problem in a team with double Fairy and a Steel type, but that immediate Flying type Terastallization is really good both offensively and defensively for Z. Obviously that Terra Blast will be a normal type move until you Terastallize, so it's a pretty big Terastallization priority for that team. But I think if you're looking at James's team, I don't think you have anything to hit Flying type super effectively. You have the Golden Go, which is going to be resisting the Flying type Terra Blast. The Golden Go is also pretty heavily threatened by King Gambit, by Incineroar, by Garchomp, and so it's kind of a tough bring into this team.
Well, it's just going to be a run back of the leads from both Z and James. James still going to try to trust in this Annihilate and Clefable duo. And it's not a bad call to just keep going for the double protect here like that last game and see if you can fish out what this Alolan Ninetales wants to lock into.
Yeah, it's also kind of fish out, does the Dragonite Terastallize? The answer is yes, 99% of the time, but no reason not to just be extra safe here. Again, there's not a whole lot that Z can do to punish this, except maybe like a very aggressive switch, but I'm not sure what you could switch into in either of these slots to get yourself into a stronger position, given a double protect. We're going to see a Terastallization right off the bat once again, and it is going to be that Dragonite, dropping that Dragon typing to become a pure Flying type and setting up that Flying type Terra Blast.
Terra Blast is just doing an incredible amount of damage.
Yeah.
And this is where James started to get into a rough position in that first game, is that you don't really have a whole lot of things that you can even actually switch in to take those Terra Blasts. This Annihilate, if you do see, the Blizzard actually.
Ooh.
Okay, is he switching things up? If it was a Freeze Dry, you lock again, but I think the Blizzard is also smart. You get to damage both targets, and you get to get around the Follow Me from Clefable.
But that also means that James can now pretty easily Terastallize this Annihilate if he wants to. By doing that, you drop the weakness to Flying type Terra Blast, and you also resist the Blizzard. So in that case, you can possibly even not go for Follow Me and maybe try to break a possible multi-scale with Moonblast. I do believe we saw the Follow Me lock in there just to be extra safe. I think before you get a bulk up off, maybe you want to redirect at least one of those Terra Blasts.
This Clefable too maybe is going to deal with this Blizzard a little bit better.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure about that one. Alolan Ninetales, though, is certainly putting on way more offensive pressure than we have seen it do in the past. As a Follow Me does redirect away the Dragonite later, but look at how well that this is going, this defensive terrestrialization is going to keep this Annihilate safe.
Bulk Up does come through. The Annihilate will boost its attack and defense, and because Blizzard did get locked in, Rage Fist is already being boosted as well. The Terra Blast is redirected by that Follow Me into Clefable. Takes a good chunk of damage, but I think after the Citrus Berry, maybe just enough for one more Blizzard to just not knock it out.
Absolutely. Unless you crit again,
yeah.
I guess. Clefable seems to be a little bit susceptible to that.
Yeah, a little bit.
Follow Me, certainly safe to do once again, and then Annihilate gets another bulk up to have to deal with this Dragonite.
Which is really nice. I think, especially because if this Ninetales does attack again on this turn, that is another Blizzard that's hitting the Annihilate. That's a second Rage Fist boost that you're getting before even taking too much damage with this Annihilate. But Z, noticing that, does not want to give that Annihilate a boost and swaps out the Ninetales.
Great call then by James to read that the switch is going to happen, so you can start to break this multi-scale on the Dragonite and get another bulk up for free. That is +2 defense now for this Annihilate, and you don't have the super effective weakness to these flying type attacks. So even though the Terra Blast is going to come through again from this Dragonite, it is going to target down the Clefable anyway. That is going to knock it out, so you don't get a chance to break the multi-scale this time. But I love that targeting from Z to sort of read into James knowing that that switch is going to happen.
I think it's smart from both players. You know, they both recognize, okay, if I stay with this Ninetales, I'm giving Annihilate another boost while not doing too much damage to it, so I'm not going to let that happen. James says, you know, I can't redirect Blizzard, obviously, and if the Dragonite targets Annihilate, then that's honestly kind of good for me because I'll have 2 bulk ups. I'm already not taking super effective damage, so I'm not going to Follow Me and try and break multi-scale, but Z notices that as well. Gets rid of that Clefable, so it is no longer around to protect that Annihilate.
Moonblast now to help break the multi-scale. The special attack drop not going to help, but you do see this Dragon Claw move first from the Garchomp, so maybe something to keep in mind for later parts of this game. But as you see the Rage Fist follow up from the Dragonite, big boss Dragonite now down, and that is one less start that James has to deal with.
That is now 3 Rage Fist boosts, I believe, so it is a 200 base power move coming off +2 attack from this Annihilate. I'm not sure there's anything left on Z's side of the field that can stomach a Rage Fist other than that Incineroar, but if you do bring an Incineroar, you're just giving it another attack boost and kind of a free Drain Punch to heal all the way back up. So this has become a very strong position for James. A really smart no Tailwind there on the Whimsicott, knowing that, you know, my Annihilate is faster than the Dragonite. I don't care if Garchomp attacks me first. I have 2 defense boosts. It's not going to knock me out. King Gambit comes in instead. It's not the Incineroar, but it is an even juicier Drain Punch target. So now this Whimsicott, with that Focus Sash still intact, you can give yourself the opportunity to go straight for a Tailwind, make sure your Annihilate is faster than both the Garchomp and the Alolan Ninetales. And of course, this Annihilate now really doesn't take too much damage from the Garchomp. If you do have the opportunity to get a Drain Punch off in a King Gambit, you're going straight back up to full health. This is a much stronger position for James than in Game 1.
So many decisions to make here, but I love the call out that you made where Tailwind is not necessary in order to make sure that you can have the speed advantage. And so I love just being able to go on the offensive here. And reading that there's going to be a Protect from this King Gambit. It's going to be a Safety Goggles, Dark Terra, Defiant King Gambit, and then Moonblast is just a one-hit knockout. Wow. That is a crit. We otherwise don't see that happen every day.
That does a critical hit, and maybe a little bit unfortunate for Z, but that is such a strong turn from James regardless, knowing that this Whimsicott won't be knocked out this turn regardless. The Garchomp is only running Dragon and Ground moves. The King Gambit does not have Iron Head, it is double dark, so even something like a Stomping Tantrum plus Kowtow Cleave probably doesn't knock out Whimsicott. You can get that Moonblast off, which allows you to, on the next turn, go for another Moonblast to KO Garchomp, go for the Drain Punch to KO King Gambit. Just sped up a little bit by the critical hit, one-hit KO, but I think regardless, this Annihilate was just not getting knocked out anyway.
No, and the Rage Fist stacks now should be enough to knock out this Alolan Ninetales too.
Yeah, most likely. I think especially if you're going to go for the Sunny Day with Whimsicott, turn off the snow, that means that defense boost will be dropped. There's no more Blizzard perfect accuracy for the rest of the game. Freeze Dry still would possibly be super effective, and Sucker Punch does come in here, so if Freeze Dry comes out, this actually might be the end of Annihilate.
Wow, it is going to be the sucker punch into the freeze dry, and maybe a little bit of a mistake to go for the sunny day instead of something like the tailwind. That way you would have been able to be faster than this Alola Ninetales and knock it out, but maybe you don't care about that. You know you've got your Hydreigon in the back that does have a couple of fire type attacks to lock into. Notably, it's going to be the Heat Wave, but it's not 100% accurate.
Yeah, I mean, you still have the option for the Heat Wave here. It is Choice Specs, Sun Boosted Heat Wave. That might be enough to just end the game on its own, but you do have to wonder if Tailwind might have been the better play there. You would have had the opportunity to go for that Drain Punch into King Gambit, and of course, possibly go for that Rage Fist straight into Ninetales. Heat Wave does come off, though, after the Tailwind with the Sun, and the Choice Specs is enough for the double one-hit KO.
I just wonder what could have happened if maybe one of those Heat Wave misses.
Especially the Ninetales, right? King Gambit with the 2 Dark moves doesn't do a whole lot to Hydreigon, but if you do miss that Ninetales and the Freeze Dry comes through, that might just be a one-hit KO.
Regardless, we get a chance to go to a game number 3 in the set between James and Z. And some fantastic adjustments from James. You kind of have to... I mean, maybe it goes back to what Z locked into at the beginning of that game too, though, with Ninetales going for the Blizzard instead. I'm kind of wondering what was going through his mind to have switched up the board like that.
I think it makes sense. Like, by going for Blizzard, you're getting guaranteed damage into both slots. But I do think the Freeze Dry might be a slightly better play just because you can, make sure that Annihilate is not terastallizing. And as soon as Blizzard is locked in, that's kind of an instant Terra from that Annihilate, right? You're resisting Blizzard, you're not weak to the Terra Blast anymore. And of course, Blizzard kind of inadvertently boosting the Rage Fist power right off the bat isn't super great for Zay either. Maybe you're going for some freezes. I don't know. It's always an option there. There's nothing to prevent that other than this sunny day on Whimsicott that was not yet on the field. But I do think freeze dry might be a slightly better lock in that case.
I agree. You were able to deal with the Annihilate at the end of the day, but then I don't know. I still look at this turn and I think, what could have happened if the Heat Wave missed?
Yeah. Well, luckily for James, it did not. And we will have the chance to see a third game between these trainers. I'm interested to see if they do opt to kind of switch up their strategies here, because I think this Annihilate obviously is very strong. But once you get a couple bulk ups off, you're not taking too much damage at all from the Garchomp, from the Dragonite, from the King Gambit, those 3 really strong physical attackers. But you have to make sure it's in a position where you can terastallize safely, right? It's really just a freeze dry that threatens you once you've turned into a water type. So as soon as Ninetales locks into something else, you can terastallize, but if it is threatening that freeze dry, you have to be very, very careful.
I agree. Well, we're just seconds away from being able to get into this game number 3 between James Baek and Zhang, where the winner is going to move on to our asymmetrical top cut at the end of this incredible 2-day competition at the Louisville Regional Championships. So let's see. I feel like it's pretty safe to just keep going for Annihilate Clefable if you're James, and Z continuing to lock into the Dragonite and the Alola Ninetales. But it is a switch up from James. It is going to be the Hydreigon and the Whimsicott. But I love this switch up from James.
I do too. You're pretty immediately threatening that sunny day heat wave combination, especially because this Hydreigon is the Terra Fire. Even if the Ninetales locks into a freeze dry or a Moonblast, that would be super effective and perfectly accurate in the sun. The fire type Terra on the Hydreigon will prevent that super effective damage. And of course, you drop the weakness to the Dragonite's attacks as well in the form of Low Kick and Ice Spinner, both of which would be pretty strong into this Hydreigon. I think that the Annihilate, the Annihilate plan kind of depends on what Ninetales locks, right? And in this case, I think you have a little bit more agency as James to go for more offense right off the bat.
You've also kind of conditioned Z maybe to have to go back to that game 1 game plan where you lock into Freeze Dry and you lock into that Terra Flying Terra Blast. You're going to see both Pokemon stay on the field as this Dragonite from Z goes for that Terra Flying. Is very much trusting in that strategy, but the fact that this Hydreigon is going to be on the field, is going to be fast, it's going to be able to go for the Heat Wave, but that's why you do see this accuracy being a problem. It misses the Dragonite entirely and allows this Hydreigon to get knocked out by the Moonblast.
Yeah, this Moonblast comes through and just one-hit KOs that Hydreigon off the bat. The Terra Blast will also bring Whimsicott down to its Focus Sash, and I respect that play a lot from James, just unfortunately that Heat Wave misses, which means that Dragonite's multi-scale is still intact. So this is a really rough position to be in. You do get the Tailwind up. Obviously, you still have your Whimsicott sticking around. It didn't get knocked out thanks to that Focus Sash, but we're back to that precarious position where one Extreme Speed easily knocks it out. If you do opt to Terrastallize the Whimsicott to avoid that Extreme Speed, then you can no longer Terrastallize Annihilate, which, again, it's not locked into Freeze Dry the Ninetales, so you have the option to possibly go for that Terrastalization on the end Annihilate there, but then your just Whimsicott is left. What can it do against this Extreme Speed Dragonite?
No, it can't do anything. It's just going to get knocked out before it gets a chance to move again. And so James has a really difficult decision to make. Do you actually use the Terra now? Do you just trust that this Dragonite is going to go for the Extreme Speed here into that Whimsicott? And could you take a Moonblast from this Ninetales?
Z's been very aggressively targeting this Annihilate and just not letting James fake him out with something like the Terra Ghost, even with a threat of a Follow Me from that Clefable. So I wouldn't be too surprised to see attacks just go straight into that spot again. King Gambit does replace Ninetales though, and Extreme Speed comes through to KO Whimsicott.
So James does get that call correct. The Extreme Speed means that this Annihilate is not going to take any damage, and it gets a chance to go for this bulk up free of charge. With this Clefable coming in, you do have that Follow Me pressure, so there's no way for this King Gambit to Sucker Punch you, and you know that you can take a Terra Blast or two from this Dragonite, so Annihilate does get a chance to actually get set up here.
Annihilate has a chance to set up, and I think you really want to break this multi-scale on Dragonite as soon as possible as well. The King Gambit, again, only has Dark-type attacks, so it threatens the Clefable not at all. The Clefable really doesn't care about King Gambit, especially because it is that unaware Clefable. If King Gambit opts for a Sword Stance this turn, trying to capitalize on it for attack, you can just redirect it. Won't take any extra damage thanks to that unaware ignoring the boost. And we've seen the Dragonite Terra Blast do a decent chunk to Clefable, but certainly not enough to put it in range for another attack.
James kind of on the ropes a little bit. I think when it comes down to this Annihilate, you get a chance to protect it for now, and so this Clefable is going to have the job of breaking this Dragonite's multi-scale, which it does get a chance to do. And this Annihilate gets another turn to stick around as the Terra Blast is going to go right into that Annihilate's Protect, as is the Kowtow Cleave. I like the Kowtow Cleave anyway, because I think that you've put James in a position where I think he has to go for Follow Me, he has to go for the bulk up. You really want to try to get any amount of, I think, Rage Fist stacks at this point. Oh, it's so tough.
It really is, especially because you're kind of running out of options for, you know, as soon as I'm taking more damage, it's going to most likely stick around. Of course, you have the Citrus Berry. You do have the Drain Punch into King Gambit, especially with the current bulk up you already have. I think one Drain Punch is easily enough to one-hit KO this King Gambit that cannot Terrastallize. But this Dragonite is still an issue. The Ninetales in the back, of course, an issue as well. If you find yourself having to Terrastallize before Ninetales comes back in and locks into another move, you're just giving Z the option to select their moves as much as they want. Garchomp also still here too, so we're in a 2v4 situation. And this Annihilate, you know, a bulk up into 3 physical attackers could be enough. But you also have to worry about those Ninetales with the choice specs.
Ninetales can still go for the Freeze Dry, which would be super effective into this Terra Water Annihilate now. But there's still a chance for James to put himself into a better position. You see Z sort of like nodding his head a little bit. There's a Protect onto the Clefable, the bulk up onto the Annihilate, and Z still gets a chance to attack here.
The Annihilate does boost its attack and defense once more, back up to +2. Terra Blast comes through into that Annihilate, has the boosted defense, is no longer a fighting type, but that's still really significant damage, especially considering you need this Annihilate as healthy as possible because it is your only source of damage, really, for the rest of this game. We do have the Clefable, which of course threatens a super effective Moonblast into this Garchomp, but this Garchomp really not an important piece for Z anymore. I think you can pretty easily just leave it here on the field, maybe get some chip damage off with it, and like a Earthquake or a Stomping Tantrum here does a lot of damage as well.
Yeah, just gotta whittle away at this Clefable first, kind of leave this Annihilate all on its lonesome towards the end of this game. But with the Rage Fist, it's not enough to actually knock out this Dragonite before it gets a chance to go for yet another Terra Blast. And this Clefable is in range, that a critical hit is good enough. And that Clefable doesn't even get a chance to eat its snack.
Really smart of Z to go for the Stomping Tantrum instead of the Earthquake there. You might be tempted to go for Earthquake just to get some extra damage on Annihilate, but one more Rage Fist boost would have KO'd the Dragonite. So the Dragonite sticks around because of that choice to use Stomping Tantrum for the single target damage. The Terra Blast there with the critical hit is enough to knock out Clefable, and now this Annihilate will be knocked out by a Freeze Dry as soon as Ninetales hits the field. So Z is moving on to the single elimination top cut stage of the Louisville Regional Championships.
What a great match between these two trainers, though. James, of course, has had so much success in the past couple of years. To get this close at his first regional championship, gotta feel really good, but also has to sting a little bit.
Of course. I mean, you have to respect, like, I did very well. I was 1 win away from that top cut, which was a very respectable performance. But you also have to think back, I was 1 win away from top cut, right? That hurts a little bit more, right?